Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Taylor. I'm from the University of Queensland. And welcome back from lunch. This is the first session for the afternoon. My other purchase is your purchase, takeover and cash out schemes. Just a few housekeeping. Mike said he was happy to take questions. If this could be done through the app, and we'll post the questions at the end if there's time. Please turn your mobile phones off, etc. So I'd like to introduce Mike Smith from Akamai. Mike serves as the APJ Chief Technology Officer for Security and is responsible for supporting sales, professional services, operations, product management, and marketing across all of the Akamai Security Solutions portfolio. So can you please make him welcome?
All right. Cool. So welcome, everybody. Don't leave. Don't leave. Come up front. Come up front. Plenty of questions. I want to talk about account takeovers. The reason is that I personally have been fighting account takeovers for almost 4 years now. I have a friend who's the director of research at the retail ISAC. There's actually a retail ISAC, and they're brand new. They're building out. But she says that the biggest issue that her constituency is dealing with by far is account takeover, and I actually believe it, okay? Let me go back on the slides for a second here. I've got my purchase is your purchase. There's a little gag here because you always have to start with a joke. So here's it's like a bumper sticker from Bugground, right? My other computer is your computer. So I modified it a little bit and said, hey, you know what? Your purchase is my purchase, okay? There's one other fun bumper sticker that's applicable here, which is users are losers. And there's a classic system administrator joke, which is you've been a system administrator for too long when you see a bumper sticker that says users are losers and you don't even think about drugs, okay? However, there's a segue, which is that users have some bad habits, okay? One of the habits is that they reuse accounts and passwords, okay? Don't laugh, you know you do it, okay? Everybody does it. Most people pick when they do it, but what actually happens is the attackers know that they do this, okay? So we've been fighting since I first got involved in October of 2012. I started fighting account takeover with some of my customers. We started out with about 35 customers that were e-commerce sites that were dealing with this. It's now spread, and I'll talk a little bit about the spread here in a minute, okay? But basically, the way the basic attack works, it's not even an attack, it's more of like just a scam, is they go in, they phish the user, okay? So everybody knows that. Phishing site, they capture username, capture password, okay? Easy, basic stuff. Then what they do is they go to a set of tools that they have set up, and I'll show you what some of these look like. Really simple things. And they, excuse me. So they go in, they use something called an account checker, okay? They call it an account checker. There are other different names for it, but basically they have a box and they put in username, password combinations, and they just fill this text box. The script goes out through a set of proxy servers and checks to see where that user has reused their particular username and password combination, okay? Then things get really fun, okay? Okay, so this is basically what I just went through. So they set up a tools site. I'll show you what these look like. Most of them are basic PHP scripts. You need a LAMP stack to run them on. Fairly easy to actually set up. That's the big benefit that they have right now. Okay? Then they go out and they scan the internet looking for proxies. They call them SOCs. Okay? Usually just SOCs 5 proxies, anything that's an open proxy out there. They get their password list, they'll phish it, they'll trade with their friends, they'll go buy some. We've actually had a correlation. So LinkedIn had a list that was published last week. Yeah, it was last week. There's some debate over whether that was just a rehash of the leak from years ago or if it was the new one. But we'll actually see a corresponding increase in account takeover activity based on a database dump like that. Okay? Then they'll go check these on different sites with an account checker. It's a lot more effective than brute forcing, because brute forcing, you go, Mike Smith, AAA, AAB, AAC. With this, they know they have the seed information, so they'll have about a success ratio of 1 in 12, okay? Which is pretty good from the attacker's perspective. Then they'll cash out whichever way, and we'll talk about that. And then they'll get some kind of money some way. Okay? Okay. This is actually how I got introduced to all this, was thanks to this guy. And his name's in here. It's Van Tien Tu and Dui Hai Trong. And Dui Hai Trong, he was one of the guys that specifically I looked at all of his tools. Okay? Because he would leave his name, he'd leave his initials in the actual tool. Okay? But what these guys are, and as we started investigating this, right? And what happened was one of our customers, okay? And if you don't know Akamai, we basically deliver the web. We deliver about 30% of the web, including a lot of e-commerce sites, a lot of FSI sites. If you get rid of the porn and the gambling, we deliver about 80% of the web. Okay? So we deliver all these sites for people. We help them make money. And we had one customer that called in, and they said, hey, I've got this problem in that my users are complaining that their shipping address changed. So, okay, that's kind of interesting, right? It might be a bad backup job. It might be a database integrity problem. So we started looking, and they were all made from web requests from a limited set of IP addresses. So we looked and saw whatever traffic was happening from the source IP addresses, and we discovered that they're all open proxies, and we got lucky where we found an account checker script out on Pastebin where somebody had dumped it. Okay? So they found it on their server. They said, hey, I don't know what this is. Dumped it out on Pastebin, and we discovered it, and then had a whole bunch of different breadcrumbs, and then we followed those to investigate the entire situation. Okay? But we found this guy's tools. We actually worked, we found his tools, we looked at it. He had account checkers for about 35 different organizations. About 30 of those were customers, just, internet retailer, top 100 e-commerce site type stuff. I had one staffer that I gave him the list, and I said, here's a list of everybody that's in this tool. Go touch them, talk to them, explain to them how this works, and help them solve the problem. Okay? So that was his full-time job for about 2 months, was just calling people and dealing with the victims of this. Okay? Now this guy also, earlier this year, they sentenced them. I forget what they got. They got like 6 years or 8 years of prison time, and you'll actually see them, there's this row right here of people, okay? But they sentenced them in January in Hanoi, okay? But the thing that they actually did was they built the basic core tools, they built some of the basic platforms, and now there's this huge underground community, probably several thousand people that are running goods, that are doing account checkers, that are grabbing stuff. They're basically running this little underground economy just using the tools that these guys created and modified versions of it. Okay? All right. So the difference is in 2012, we had 35 targets. We did the same exercise last year where we had about 150 different targets that were listed in tools. So we did outreach to all of those. And today, who knows, because it's just grown and grown and grown. And you can go find these tools out there. Okay? Originally, they targeted US and UK sites. So you start with the internet retailer, top 100. Most of those are US companies. There was a handful of UK companies. And now, because those guys are pretty good at defending themselves, they've moved to smaller targets. They've moved to things that are less defended. Not a big surprise. They started out in FSI e-commerce. They moved to travel, hospitality, grocery stores, okay? Which kind of makes me laugh. So with grocery stores, you'll see this a lot where they have a rewards point card, right? So you show up with your card and you make your purchase, and you've got your card and you put it out and they add stuff to your account, and then you check in online and you create a voucher. So you say, okay, I want to cash out my 2,000 points. Give me a $25 voucher, and then you can give that voucher to your friends. You can use it yourself. Basically, it's not tied to your account. And so they could take these vouchers, download them, give them, trade them basically as cash. Okay? And that's for grocery stores. So they do it with a whole bunch of other things, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay? And we started out seeing, I started out seeing tons of Vietnamese things. Over time, we're seeing that with a lot of other characters inside of ASEAN. So Malaysia and Indonesia come to mind very rapidly. We're also seeing it in some activity from China, primarily against South Korea and Japan. Okay? This is a really easy one. This is just a basic checking service. You can see right? That's actually the URL where this is at. So UGmarket, ugmarket.com.is. And you can go in and log in. And you see kind of how they advertise it. They all have this really cool script kiddie kind of motif to it where it's black with the green writing, okay? Just like all my terminals that I have. Here's another one that's check proxies. So you go in and you put in the IP address and the port and check against google.com. And it will actually go in and check to see if that particular proxy is still open and see if it's actually blocked on a blacklist by Google. Okay? So you'll go harvest all these lists of different proxies. Okay? This one is a credit card checker. You put in you put in the credit card number, the full name, the CVV2, the postal code, all of that stuff. You'll put in each line as a different card, and that tool will actually go out, make a small purchase on a site to see if the card is still valid. Okay? Not the most sophisticated things. This is another one. They actually have a good graphic designer, a relatively okay graphic designer. So you get the cool thing. But you see up here, you've got the account checker, which checks to see if checks for account reuse. You've got the credit card checker, checks to see if the credit card that you stole was actually valid. This checks different types of accounts. And this is where you can go in and put in your dumps. So they've got things that you'll give it lists of accounts, and it'll check for duplicates. They have one tool, I think it's the next one. Nope. But it will check for expired accounts, right? So it'll show you how many of the credit cards are actually expired. Simple stuff that you could do with regular shell scripts that they do with a web form. Okay? So a little bit of language that they use. You've got UG tools. So UG is the underground, which is just anything with carders and account takeover. You can actually take all of these terms and just go Google search, and you'll find some of the easy to find ones. Okay? The screenshots that I showed were just from last night. I did the screenshot and put them up. Okay? So UG tools is just underground tools. That's all the web tools that they have. Socks, which is just their proxies. So they'll have socks lists or socks and the date or some way to check for socks. You'll have account checker. They abbreviate it to ACC checker. Okay? So that's actually checking for the reuse. And then you've got the credit card number or CCV or CVV checker. That's to actually check the credit card data. Okay? Everybody follow that? Okay. So cash out schemes. These are the fun ones for me. Okay. So the basic account checker piece, we see that it hits almost all of our e-commerce customers at this point. I talk a lot about it just because I want people to be aware. If you have this problem, get in touch with us. We can help you out. I have a whole bunch of all the full information that I can give you. Okay. Including scripts, things like that. The cash out schemes. So they started out originally with prepaid gift cards. Okay, so what they would do is they'd go into the e-commerce site, they'd take over the account, they'd check to see if the user had their credit card stored, right? So they store my card for future purposes. When you check that, then it's stored and you can go buy things against it. Okay, and so what they would do is once they took over an account, they would go in. They would check to see if the card was stored. If it was, they'd buy a bunch of prepaid cards and have them shipped to somebody. Okay? Some are actually delivered electronically. Okay? And so those they would just trade online. But a lot of them you physically buy a card, have it shipped, and they would ship that to somebody who just runs a Dropbox. We saw at one point they were selling them on eBay. Sometimes they sell them through Craigslist. Sometimes they set up physical kiosks. So we saw at one point they had a kiosk outside of the LA airport, and they were selling these prepaid cards at half half the face value. Okay? So they'll do things like that. There's regular gift cards, so your iTunes card, your grocery store cards, your department store cards, they'll go do those. Same thing. If the credit card is stored, go ahead and buy those. Sometimes you can take reward points. So for credit card reward points, so like your Visa, American Express, Discover, where you have the rewards points, you can cash those out and get prepaid gift cards, okay? And they'll buy those too. Other cash equivalents, so that's where the vouchers come in. There are other things that you can convert that they'll actually trade at face value. Loyalty points, they'll cash out for goods. So it's either goods or something that's a cash convertible. And then high value items, so phones, cameras, laptops, things that are usually electronic that you can actually sell in a secondary market. Okay. So detection. So what are we're doing? We're working on this with a lot of our customers. We originally started playing whack-a-mole. Okay. So what we do is we'd say, okay, let's set up rate controls for login. Okay. So that when you see a original source IP address, they send 10 login requests in 5 seconds. That's a script of some kind, so go ahead and block them. Okay? The problem is that over time, we've taught them to evolve, and they use a lot more proxies. So they'll run from one proxy until we block it, and then they'll switch, go to a different proxy, run that until we block it, and basically rotate through all their proxies. Okay? So that becomes a question of how do we find all of their proxies and block those proactively, at least for this week or this next couple of days. Okay? But over time, as you block them, they keep popping up. Okay? We did some things on the customer side. So the first one is find where multiple customers have the same shipping address. That's usually where they buy goods and they have it shipped to one person. Okay? And then that person figures out how to sell it. Okay? So you'll see that. So show me all of the places where basically all the shipping addresses for customers, get rid of the apartment buildings where you have multiple people with different units, and that's where your actual drop boxes are. Okay? Email address domains. So we used to have one domain that they used that was p1vn.com. Okay, so papa1 victornovember.com. Okay, and what they do is when they take over an account, they would change the email address for the account to the same email address at a domain that they can control. So that way when they made a purchase, the user didn't get the email to say, oh, you've just bought prepaid cards. If this isn't your order, click here to go remove the order. Okay? So that way the users wouldn't discover that they've actually had something ordered on their account. Okay? But you can go in and search through your user database, find all the domains for email addresses, and basically sort them and count them, and get rid of the obvious domains like Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, get rid of those, and look at all the domains that have multiple users where you don't know what that domain is. Okay? And those will be your compromised accounts. Okay? Vietnamese accounts, so you'll see those. I'm more interested in where are the Vietnamese named accounts logging in from, and is that a proxy or some other kind of jump box that they're using to actually take over accounts and test their tools. Okay? Increased number of logins from a limited set of IP addresses. Those are the proxies that the account checkers are coming through. And then being listed in a tool. Okay? If you take all of the keywords that I had, so especially ACC checker, and your Foo Corp, so you go search on Google for Foo Corp ACC checker, or Foo Corp UGG tools, and you'll actually find where somebody has built a tool to actually attack you. Okay? Sometimes you can search on Pastebin, search on some of the other paste sites like that, but most of the time you'll catch the web front end that they have. Okay? All right, best fixes. Unfortunately, none of these are actually viable. Okay? Don't use your email as your username. We've had some customers that have switched, Some of the travel and hospitality folks did this, where they said, we give you a loyalty rewards number. That's now your primary account, and you have to actually use that to log in instead of your email address. Okay, that reduces the usability of that account across multiple websites. Okay? Don't reuse passwords. Okay, most security people understand that. We'll use something like LastPass or OnePass as a password store to actually have a different password for every site. Most normal humans don't do that. Okay? And then use something other than just a regular username and password combination. Okay? If you can do soft tokens, do it. If you can use username plus password plus last name, that helps. That gives you a little bit of fighting chance. Add something else to the login information to prove that it's you. Okay? Better workflow for profile changes. So I came to this realization after working this for a couple of years that if you're an e-commerce site and you have anything that's actually convertible, that you are a financial services organization and you have to have some of the same controls that they have. Okay? The biggest one is when the user changes their shipping address, changes their email address, send notification to the old address, so that way they can catch that somebody's actually accessed their account. Okay? Factor and half authentication is just adding that, adding in your last name, your first name, adding in something else as a second quasi-password. Rate controls, I talked about that. And then this one is something that actually the service providers are doing for some SaaS applications. It's this last one here, which is getting all the password dumps. Okay, and if you look, there was Gawker, there was Ashley Madison, there was LinkedIn. There are all these public dumps that are out there. If you're defending a website and you're not getting a copy of these dumps to compare to your user database, you're basically falling behind more and more and more. Okay? There was somebody who wrote a tool, and I forget who it was. I thought it was Netflix, but I haven't found it. And it's called the dump tank, where they just take all of these dumps and throw it in there, and it compares against their user population, so they can see who's likely at risk for being having an account takeover problem, and then they'll force the user to do a password reset next time they log in. Okay. All right. What we're working on inside of Akamai, we've gone back and forth on this. A lot of times we dealt with account takeover by services. So we would send a lot of services, they would darken the sky, and they would set up all these different WAF configurations. We're trying to figure out how to make that easier, gentler, nicer for our customers. We have a web application firewall. We have a bot mitigation tool or bot managing tool. And we're looking at, well, do account checkers fit into one or the other? I don't think we've really set on something. But behind the scenes, we're doing a lot of data analysis with WAF data and making feeds of that are in our products. So we might attach account takeover to one product or another, or we might come up with a third product. I have yet to see how that'll actually work out. Okay, but once again, we're trying to take something that's very, very labor intensive and turn that into something that's a lot easier for our customers to do. Okay, so resources. We have a blog. Read our blog. Get information there. We put advisories out there. Okay, so when we first started working with account checkers, I had a lot of customers. I had not a lot of time to talk to every one of them. So we made a report. Okay, we made an advisory. We put in source code. We put in all the investigation artifacts, names, email addresses, physical addresses, phone numbers, put all that into a report and gave that to every customer that was listed in a tool. Okay? And then if you know traffic light protocol, which is what DHS uses for information sharing, we made that TLP red. We gave it to every customer that was on the list, and then we called them a couple days later to talk about what was in there. Okay? I realized that there was probably a huger or a larger community of people that needed to know about this that we didn't even know who they were. Okay, so you don't just go up to somebody, hey, are you affected by this? So we took all of the naughty bits out of it. We sanitized it fairly well. So it was just about, here's account checkers, here's roughly how they work, and we made it at TLP green. Okay? And then I gave it to every e-commerce customer that we have. We actually took a sanitized version of that and put it out on our corporate blog just as a teaser. Okay? We wanted to get the basic information out there, have people come back to us and say, that's interesting, I'm also affected by this. Can you folks help me out and solve this problem? And then we'd get them into a mitigation, basically a mitigation path with some of our CSERT folks. They would call, they would talk to you, and they would actually help you solve that problem. But I was using that advisory as a tease to get people's response so we knew who we actually needed to help. Okay? But we've got a lot of resources that are out there. We also have patch and vulnerability information. We've got a couple quarterly reports. One's on specific to security. But it's out there. Use it. Get smarter. Okay? And that's what I have. Time for questions. We've got about 10 minutes, give or take. Questions, comments? No questions so far. Okay, gentlemen. James 10, yes.
Do you use those IP addresses that we know as account checkers and you pass it to other organizations that help with cleaning up the internet?
That's a true question. So the question is, do we use some of our account checker source IP addresses and give them to anybody to help clean up the internet? The short answer there was no. Okay, mostly because of process and trying to figure out how to actually do that. What happens is with anything like this, and we do this with our IP intelligence information that we have, where I can say, yeah, there's a bad guy, and I know that he's attacking 20 different organizations, but at some point, you just don't have enough effort to police up the internet. Okay? What works best is if we say, here's an extract, we wanted to give it to somebody who actually basically splits it and forks it and gets it to the responsible party to actually fix. Okay? So you'll see this a lot with phishing, where they have takedown services, where you pay somebody to call the ISP to say, hey, you've got something that's hosted here that you need to actually fix. And you kind of run out of effort before you run out of stuff to fix. Okay? But yeah, it needs to happen. It needs to happen in the future. I'm not quite sure how to actually get it to scale out. Okay? Yes?
I work for University of
Mm-hmm.
University of Auckland.
Yep, I've heard of this.
We have a similar problem, but our constant phishing attacks against our credentials.
Okay.
And one of the things that I've found, what I do, is actually I record all our authentications, and every day run a report looking for multiple authentications over a short period,
Mm-hmm.
authentication attempts over a short period, and we found that really effective way of picking
Yep.
up. Because I think most of the people that we deal with check their credentials in a batch. So they do a phishing run, they get 10 people,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll bang all those in over 2 minutes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's,
And
yeah.
that is actually a really easy and problem.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually the nature of the tool, where the tool, it's a PHP script, right? So they're all like PHP. There are a couple that are downloadable that you run in a Windows environment. Most are PHP scripts, and you actually go into the form and dump all the information in there. There's no real pause or regulator for it. It basically says, make an instance of curl, make the request, and look at the return object. So it goes through as, you dump them in as a batch, and then it goes through and runs through every one as fast as it can. So yeah, you will see a lot of logins from a single set of source.
We've found that when we started doing this about 4 years ago, first time I began to put
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now it's really,
Yeah, as they lose effectiveness, they'll go to a different target, right? Which is usually what they're. Yeah.
the point where they just don't, well, we still get that, but
Hmm?
it's a lot more direct.
Yep. Yep. Fair. Okay. Yes, sir.
E-commerce sites doing decent rate limiting, like what it's talking about. Are they actually doing rate limiting on people's credential use of things? And are they more interested in people's ease of use than the security?
So yes. So the question is, are they doing rate limiting on logins? And are they not blocking because of ease of use? So yes, all of that. Okay, all of that. Actually, if you look back to, so we sell a web application firewall, right? That's what we do, and we've got a lot of e-commerce customers. So if you look back to 5 or so years ago, most of our e-commerce customers had WAF. They had it up. They had it installed. They were drastically afraid of actually blocking anything. Simply because if you make an application change that causes a high false positive event to happen, then basically that shuts off your income stream until you can fix it. Okay? So in the commerce space especially, they're very afraid to actually block things. And that cynically I say that's why we actually created my team, was to go teach them how and when to actually put stuff into deny. Okay? But it varies widely. I've seen some that have good security teams, some that have no security teams, and they are afraid of putting stuff in block mode. One of the things that works for us in our favor with rate controls, and we do that, we basically count the number of requests, okay? And you count the number of requests per second for a 5-second period and a 120-second period, and you can scope that and say only count on path 2 login. Okay? And we set that up for a lot of people. We do it with the FSI guys, we do it with the e-commerce folks, and we'll set that up because even if it's a super aggregator, right? So like cellular networks, a lot of times all the users go through a single set of proxies. Even then, you don't have that many login attempts from a single IP address. Okay? So that one we could set up and we could use that quite a bit, but then as soon as you start blocking, they move to a different proxy, and then you have to count until you qualify them again and start blocking them again. So, we were basically teaching them to play whack-a-mole over time. And so we're looking at smarter responses to give out. So instead of giving them a 403 request denied response, give them a I'm sorry you failed login response that's exactly the same as if that request would have gone to the web application in the first place. Okay? So getting smarter responses, and that's eventually what we'll have. We'll have a better framework for doing that, but today I don't really have that full framework. Okay? Okay? Want time for one last question? All right. Yes, sir.
I heard you talk about bot manager. Can you tell us a bit more?
Bot manager. All right. Let me do my one pitch, which is we have whack-a-mole at our booth, so you can go hit things, work out some frustration. So we have a bot manager product where we take all of our WAF hits, all of our web delivery logs, all of our OS firewall logs, and we slice and dice it, and we categorize all the different types of scrapers that are out there. So some are search engines, some are competitors, right? Doing price checks. Some are weird things like Bloomberg looking for stock information, stock tips. So you categorize all these different things based on their activity, based on their source IP information. And then for each category, you have a response, which might be to block them outright. It might be to slow them down. It might be to treat them as a mushroom, right? So keeping them in the dark and keep feeding them manure. But basically, you have a strategy and a set of business rules for each category. Okay, so that's something new. Eventually, that might morph into an account checker solution, or we might take pieces of it and put it into another account checker specific solution. Okay. All right. Cool. So thanks everybody, and have a nice conference. All right. Cool.
So, ladies and gentlemen, can we please thank again Mike Smith? And also, if we could please remember to rate the sessions in the app.